In the Library is sponsored by Office Suite. For all your PDF, document creation, and email needs in one place, try Office Suite. Check out the description box for a link and code for 5% off all your Office Suite purchases. Hey, everybody. It's Editor Bill. I'll be guest hosting this episode of In the Library. Presenter Bill is on assignment. And today's episode, we're going to be doing a double book review. The 50-Year Mission by Gross and Altman, the first 25 years, and part 2, the next 25 years. 2 books about the first 50 years of Star Trek. So come on in, take a seat, and let's turn some pages. It all started with this man, Gene Roddenberry, former LAPD police officer and fighter pilot who wanted to write A Wagon Train to the Stars. And that Wagon Train to the Stars became Star Trek, with help from none other than Lucille Ball and her Desilu Studios, along with NBC and eventually Paramount. Star Trek became a national phenomenon, international phenomenon for that matter. And that, on those first pages, is where the story begins. In the first of the 2-volume history, 50-Year Mission, the first 25 years, Edward Gross and Mark Altman talked to many, many people. Everybody from Roddenberry himself, a lot of the cast members, the writers, production staff, studio executives. And it takes us through the history of, in this first book, the very, very beginnings of Roddenberry's idea, all the way through to the end of production and release of Undiscovered Country, the 6th Star Trek movie, which was the last of the original cast. And in the process, we learn a lot about behind-the-scenes stories of how the show and eventually movies were made. We learn about the rise of the fandom. And we're really kind of started with Star Trek, this modern version of science fiction and fantasy fandom. Started with Roddenberry and Star Trek, and we hear from all kinds of people in that world and how that whole industry got started along with Star Trek itself. Gross and Altman interview, like I said, hundreds and hundreds of people, and the 2 books combined are almost 5,100 pages of Star Trek history. This first one takes you through the end of the production of the 5th original cast movie. This poster behind me is Star Trek Generations, which was sort of the bridge between the original cast movies and the Next Generation cast, which we'll get to in a moment. But our authors here do a really good job doing their research and spending a lot of time with the cast and crew and all kinds of people, fans, and everybody. Research is very, very well done, and it's actually written in not question and answer because they didn't publish the actual questions that they asked, but in their own unedited words of their subject matter. Um, and so that's good because we really get to hear the history of Star Trek in these people's own words. At the end of Star Trek V, The Undiscovered Country, you might think that was it. And for a while, it was. But that wasn't the end. Next came Star Trek The Next Generation. And that is where the story picks up in the 2-volume oral history of the first 50 years of Star Trek. The second volume is called The 50-Year Mission, The Next 25 Years, The Next Gen to J.J. Abrams. And that is exactly what you read about in this book. Original development of Next Generation, when Roddenberry wanted to bring back the idea and then actually, in some ways, improve on the original idea and push it forward. Debates with Paramount. Desilu was long gone by then. So it was Paramount Studios. And on through the successive TV shows, Next Gen movies, the other TV shows, all the way up through the second of the J.J. Abrams revival movies, which brings us to 2016. Of course, it's been now about 6 years since then, so we're almost up to 56 years of Star Trek. Maybe there'll be another book at some point covering whatever time they decide, coming back to this and continuing the oral history. But for now, we have the first 50 years. As I said earlier, it's almost 1,500 pages of oral history of Star Trek with interviews as time goes along with all the major players. It is a really good way of creating oral history and writing it down. And with something like Star Trek, it's really good to have this, especially with the older, the earlier generations, the original generations. Well, those people aren't around anymore, unfortunately. So it's good to have their words actually written down and published in books. It's one of the good things about books, generally speaking. So overall, Gross and Altman does a really good job. They are really well-written books, very, very detailed. You get into a lot of details, not only about the making of Star Trek generally, but also how Hollywood works and how a writer's room works, with interviews with a lot of the showrunners and the writers, and just how TV shows and movies are made, going up from the 60s through now, and how things have changed and the way things are done technologically, and how special effects have changed. And you get all these aspects of making television and movies in the guise of Star Trek, along with an actual history of Star Trek itself. So, very, very highly recommended 2 books for anyone who is interested in those kinds of things. So, that's it for this episode. Please be sure to check out the link in the description for our sponsor and get 5% off all your purchases. And also check out this link right here for the merch store. Summer is coming up, You're going to need new t-shirts, new water bottles. Get them right here at our merch store. Thank you, as always, for watching, and please keep on reading.